Hello there, and welcome back to Just Another Star Wars podcast. Today we're gonna go over Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So first things first, I just want to point out, Padme is very, very, very stubborn. She gets attacked at the very beginning of the movie. Okay, she's no longer queen, but she is senator, and somebody's still trying to kill her. But after the attack, she gets talked to by Mace Windu and Master Yoda and Chancellor Palpatine. And she's like, I don't care. I don't care that I'm being attacked. I don't care about all this. I just care about democracy and the Republic and trying to do my job in the Senate. But they don't take no for an answer. So they assign Obi-Wan and a very, very young teenage Anakin who does not know how to control his emotions, which I think in this movie is good because we get to see a little bit of Anakin going dark side. At the beginning of that scene where we see everybody reuniting together, we get to see Jar Jar Binks again. But this time he is a representative for the senator, representing Naboo. And this unfortunately will be the end of Jar Jar's political career as soon as the Clone Wars is over, but we'll get into that. So in my last video, I explained how smooth Anakin was as a 9-year-old. Now, 10 years later, he's lost that smoothness because he's now trying to flirt as a teenager, but he's also trying to be professional as a Jedi, and it doesn't work out very well for him. It's very embarrassing for him. And then he complains that, she wasn't thinking about him because she would rather do her job and worry about other people than her own feelings. Whereas Anakin is saying, I've thought about every day since we parted 10 years ago. Maybe that's why you're failing as a Jedi. You gotta, stop thinking with your other body parts and, focus on being a Jedi. Because for 10 years, why would you be focusing on one thing when you're supposed to be, you're training to become a Jedi? That's all you wanted, apparently. According to Anakin in The Phantom Menace. That's such a waste of time, especially for the Jedi. Like, what's the point of you thinking of other things instead of thinking of the one thing you're supposed to be doing right then and there? I mean, that's going against what Qui-Gon said, focus determines your reality. So essentially, Qui-Gon called it. He's not very focused. He's, constantly thinking about Padme. He's constantly having nightmares about his mom. It's a very fragile road for this kid. You can definitely tell in this, just right off the bat, Obi-Wan is definitely headstrong. Obi-Wan is trying so hard to be liked by the council, but also trying to be someone like Qui-Gon. But he's definitely not. He's more like, you will listen to me. You will obey what I tell you to. Whereas Qui-Gon is like, look, this is the situation, and here's how you handle it. He's very gentle in the way. He's a very gentle parent. He doesn't demand, and he doesn't yell. He gives advice, even if it's in a stern way, but not an angry way. And he tells you how it is. He guides you through it. Whereas Obi-Wan is just like, hey, you need to go do this, and you need to figure this shit out for yourself. So going forward, someone tries to assassinate Padme in her sleep. And what's funny is that Sidious, who hires a bounty hunter, this bounty hunter ends up hiring an assassin. The assassin ends up picking up poisonous bugs, which she puts into a droid to go do her dirty work for her. So in turn, one person has another person who has bugs to go and kill Padme. Obi-Wan and Anakin are talking outside of the bedroom, and then all of a sudden they just stop talking. And Obi-Wan goes, I sense it too. Go in, they cut the bugs up. Obi-Wan jumps out the window. This is a great scene. I love the speeder chase. Especially in the part where, the droid is heading back to the assassin, and she ends up shooting the droid, destroying the droid, which makes Obi-Wan start free falling. And then Anakin swoops in, saves him, And he goes, "What took you so long?" And then Anakin's like, Master, I was looking for the right speeder with the, good capabilities, the engine, blah, blah, blah. In a way, Obi-Wan says, if you spent as much time as you do your wits, you would best master Yoda as a swordsman. Anakin jumps out of the speeder, starts fighting against this assassin. They crash on the lower parts of Coruscant on the streets. She runs into the club and they start chasing after her and they're talking and everything like that. And Obi-Wan gives him his lightsaber that he lost. And he goes, "Why do I get the feeling that you're going to be the death of me?" Foreshadowing, obviously, episode 4. And at that time, I understand Obi-Wan's frustration and everything like that, especially, having to teach this 19-year-old kid who has a lot of emotions. When he says that he's going for a drink, I am not surprised. And then after, Obi-Wan cuts the assassin's hand off, it cuts to Anthony Daniels and Ahmed Best. So that's kind of a cool little cameo to see them without their costumes on. And so, after all this happens, Obi-Wan is trying to track down where this dart came from after the assassin was assassinated by the bounty hunter. Obi-Wan starts tracking down where this dart is, and, the council decides to have Anakin and Padme go off to Naboo so they can be protected and she can be safe. And Obi-Wan relays his concerns to Master Yoda and Mace Windu, saying that he is headstrong and that his newfound abilities have made him arrogant. And Yoda says, too sure of themselves, even the more older, experienced ones, saying that, he can be kind of arrogant, he can be kind of a child at times, but even the most experienced person, even an older person, can be arrogant, can be, judging too quickly, overthinking things. It's not just a young kid's game. Anybody, that can happen to anybody. And I find it really funny that even though it's a joke, and Anakin goes, "Well, don't worry, we have R2 with us," and they laugh and giggle. Guaranteed, R2 could protect both of them, no problem. So we continue, and Obi-Wan is having a hard time tracking down the planet of Kamino where the dart came from. While he's waiting to get helped, he's staring at a busted Count Dooku. So we see Obi-Wan, he finds the planet, he goes to it. That's where we meet the Kaminoans. That's where we learn about Master Sifo-Dyas, who was convinced that he was doing the right thing and that it was all approved to have the Kaminoans start cloning. And now their base from which they are cloning from is from a man by the name of Jango Fett. And he is the model for all the clones. He then took his own clone without any different properties inside the blood cells, like the aging, enhancement, or anything like that. So it's essentially just a copy and paste of Jango himself. His name is Boba. We all know him. We all love him. We learn that Jango was hired by a man called Tyrannus, who we all learn later on is Count Dooku. And I know I said I was going to get into it later, but this seems like a better chance to talk about it now. But so Tyrannus Dooku was a Jedi at the time, or not at the time. He was a Jedi at the time of the fall of Qui-Gon Jinn. And then with everything going on between Qui-Gon's death and, the council not really doing anything, Dooku was like, I'm not really trusting the Jedi Order anymore, and I don't want to be a part of it. So he ends up leaving. We learn in the events of episode 2 that Dooku was now appointed the number 2, the apprentice to Darth Sidious. And we all assume and know that he's the one to erase Kamino from the map. after Obi-Wan meets Jango, he goes and tries to contact the Jedi Temple. And the first thing he says was, "Scramble Code 5 in order of the old folks home." Which it's so funny that even though he's a very serious person, he has his little quips. So I love this movie for the action. I mean, the movie itself is good. It's a little heavy on the romance side, but the action itself is fantastic. And starting off with one of my favorite fights is Jango versus Obi-Wan. The whole fight scene is fantastic. And then as soon as, Jango's able to fly off, he's walking onto the ramp and the door almost hits him in the head. And I learned that that's a little homage to episode 4 of the stormtrooper hitting his head when they're attacking Luke and Leia. So Anakin and Padme go back to Tatooine because Anakin is having nightmares about his mom and he really he needs to take care of her. So they go to Tatooine. They end up finding Watto again. And he's not entirely sure if this is Anakin, but then he fixes his droid and he's like, "It is you. Look at you. You're all grown up. You're a Jedi. I need your help." And Anakin's like, "I'm not here to help you. Where's my mom?" And so we learn his mom was freed and she married a man by the name of Klieg Lars, who is the father of Owen Lars and his daughter-in-law Beru, who we all know is the aunt-uncle to Luke. And in that same scene, we get to rejoin with C-3PO, and this time he's got metal coverings on. So Anakin learns that his mom was taken by the Tuskens for about a month. They tried to go out and save her, but a lot of people were killed. Anakin goes out by himself, finds her, saves her, kills all the Tusken Raiders. And I believe that's one of the very first instances where we get to see him kind of pinpoint his direction to the dark side. It's kind of a glimpse of Darth Vader, So Obi-Wan tracks down this bounty hunter to Geonosis. Finds out there's a droid army being made there, being led by Count Dooku and the Viceroy Gunray. So we learn the whole plot, essentially. Everything is being controlled by Darth Sidious, but Obi-Wan's like, "I don't believe you." And that's because they're very, very clouded right now. So back to Jar Jar. So Jar Jar is acting as a representative for Palpatine, or for Padme. And he suggests that they give emergency powers to Palpatine so he can say that he wants to create this clone army, even though it's already been made. After the war, Jar Jar ends up getting blamed by pretty much everybody for giving Chancellor Palpatine emergency powers. And it just kind of goes downhill for Jar Jar after that. It's kind of a sad story. But yeah, him being representative kind of screws him over in the end. So one of the funniest moments is going out into this arena, Anakin and Padme being captured, Obi-Wan being captured. They're driving by, and as they're getting chained up, or Obi-Wan says, "I was worried. I was beginning to worry if you had gotten my transmission." And Anakin says, "We received it and transmitted it just as you requested. But then we decided to come and rescue you." And then Obi-Wan just looks at his chains and goes, "Good job. Not very good job." Mace's intro to, seeing his lightsaber, seeing him being in action, is probably one of my favorites because he just walks up super suave and then ignites his lightsaber in front of Jango's face. And that's the first time we ever get to see a purple lightsaber. And this is the part where we get to see multiple Jedi. Hundreds of Jedi. All at once. And it's a pretty cool scene. Seeing all those lightsabers appear, I feel like it'd be a very intense battle, for sure. And one of those Jedi being Kit Fisto, we get to see his 1 in a million smile after, pushing over C-3PO. So the whole battle, between the arena scene and them being in the air to it shooting over, clones battling the droids in the dust, it's awesome. It's beautiful. But we get to see our first glimpse of the Death Star via the holo communicator. So after Padme gets knocked out of the ship and Anakin's like, you need to lower the ship. I don't care about anything else. You need to lower the ship. Obi-Wan in his right mind. I think this is where he starts getting a little more knowledgeable about Anakin and how to control him. Essentially, he knows that he's in love with Padme and Padme loves him. But he's not going to do anything about it because he loves Anakin too, and he wants to train him. And he says, look, you need to put your feelings aside because you need to understand the stake of this. And he says, put Padme in your place. What would she do if she were you? And he responds with, she would do her duty. And I think he understood it from that point on. He's like, I'm going to focus on honing my skills as a Jedi. And then when I have the time, be with my wife. We get to see Dooku fight Obi-Wan and Anakin. We see Dooku's curved lightsaber for the first time. Also one of my favorites. I'm a big fan of the curved hilt. Dooku practices Form 2 Makashi, which is a very delicate and very complex form to use. And Obi-Wan, I believe, uses Form 3, which is a very defensive style, which is in turn what made him kind of lose that fight with Dooku. But then we get the fight with Anakin, and, we all love that scene. It's so fantastic until he gets his arm cut off. And then we get to see Yoda kick some serious butt. We see his lightsaber for the first time. We see him fight for the first time. I think it's wonderful. Like, we learn that Dooku was the apprentice to Yoda, and, we learned that Dooku has officially turned to the dark side. And that being really, I'm sure it's upsetting to Yoda because, the last time he saw him was the last time he walked away from the Jedi Order, which probably still would have been tough for Yoda. And after, the battle, Dooku runs away, flies off. He goes off to Coruscant, and he and Sidious have a hideout out there. Talks to him, says, everything is coming to plan, my lord. The war has begun. All of this stuff is happening. Everything is going according to plan. And at the end, where Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Mace Windu are talking, Mace Windu and Obi-Wan are standing by the window. Yoda's in a chair. And there's no other chairs around in that council chamber. Where do they put them all? I don't get it. Where do they put the chairs? Do they go on the ground? What do they go on the wall? Where do they go? Yoda then says, begun the Clone War has. Then it cuts to that beautiful scene of the clone troopers and the Venator class ships, going up into space. And it's just, and the music with it, that whole part right there is just beautiful. Between the music, between the synchronization of the clones and everything like that, it's just, it's gorgeous. And then the final scene that we get is the marriage between Anakin and Padme. And a little tidbit on that, they didn't exchange rings, but they did exchange droids. Where when we first meet R2, he's a part of the royal ship. He's there to help the queen. And Anakin built C-3PO. And then after episode 2, you see that R2 is always with Anakin, and C-3PO is always with Padme. But that is everything that I have seen and pointed out in my own opinion of Attack of the Clones. And if you have any of your own personal thoughts or questions or anything like that, please leave them down in the comments. Thank you for tuning in and joining me in discussing Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. May the Force be with you.